listening to Development Works, produced by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Hello friends, I'm Andrew Wilson.
And I'm Michael Carlson. This is Development Works, supported by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses.
And on today's upcast, when doing international development, you need to know how to invest for impact. And here's Gabby, the president of our student club at the University of Toronto, to introduce our speaker, Fatima Karenge.
Fatima is a serial social entrepreneur and venture capitalist who is committed to empowering people through business development and financial independence. She currently serves as the executive director of Mazava, a not-for-profit that strives to connect brilliant minds in order to solve local problems. She was born in Burundi and has lived and worked in Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and Zimbabwe, just to name a few. She is passionate about community engagement, art, and social entrepreneurship.
Today on the Upcast, Fatima lets us know what works in international development.
But first, this Upcast is powered by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. We're a Canadian charity that sponsors the medical education of high-potential youth in rural Nicaragua. If you want to ensure everyone has access to quality healthcare, first visit doctorsfordoctors.ca.
The triple bottom line. Is anybody here familiar with what it is? So, it's when you look at business from not just a financial revenue point of view, but you look at it also with an environmental idea of revenue and a social revenue. You're looking at impact that is beyond getting money back, but what you're also leaving into the communities that you're working with. And that's the kind of investment that I've always believed in. And for me, having seen the UN, which is the biggest development organization that you can find out there, Doctors Without Borders, MSF, like all the other big ones, there are a lot that do a lot of good work, but I believe that unless you are truly putting an investment into the communities that you're going into, you are not actually there to do good work. Because you need to plant a seed that grows. Unless you're doing relief work, which is a whole different conversation, if you're actually there to do development, you need to plant seeds. And those seeds for me are investments. If you go in there to do work that invests, that grows the people, and go there with humility. On that trip across Tanzania, I met a woman who was talking about her issues with tampons and how she just wanted to run a business that provided tampons for these schoolgirls, but tampons that were locally made, that were sustainable. She was our first investment.
I've always loved the idea that investing can be done well and everyone can win. When Fatima talks about investments and a triple bottom line, I love that she puts into words what makes a smart investment, that it has to make more sense than just money and profit.
Just to be clear and define all our terms as well for everyone out there in radio land, the triple bottom line, or TBL, actually originates way back in the day from the UN. And so They created this idea that corporations should focus on other things and that there's more value than just money. Then some academics added to it over the years. So it's actually now defined as an accounting framework with 3 parts: social, environmental, and financial aspects. Now this is also the origin of CSR, or corporate social responsibility, which a lot of big corporations have. This idea that corporations should care more about things than just cash.
I actually didn't know that. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part of Fatima's comments there was actually the question, what are you leaving behind in the communities with your investments? Such a cool question. I think it's so real with all of these different investment products, mortgages, reverse mortgages, aggregate mortgage bonds, or whatever. Do these investments actually leave something behind in the community? And I think if the answer is no, you seriously got to question the value of that investment. It just seems like a really great test, even for my personal investments.
Yeah, and there's no better time than right now to have this talk. In this next clip, Fatima tells us about a founder of an incredible organization that started off strong, but more importantly, was able to pivot when the time was right during a crisis to save more lives and help many more people.
One of my heroes of development. Her name is Katie Myler. You're welcome to Google her. She's very Googleable. I met her in 2011, and she just had this kooky idea of going to Liberia and educating girls. And I was like, oh my God, another person who just wants to go to Africa to educate girls. And she had no background in education, no background in, she was not African. She had just been there a couple times. And I was like, but something about her energy really spoke to me. She truly believed in what she was doing. So we did a couple fundraising campaigns, talked a little bit about strategy for her organization, which is called More Than Me. Katie had gone to Liberia, fallen in love with the country, fallen in love with the people. She didn't do the tourist tour, not that there was much of a tourist tour in Liberia at the time. She lived in the slums with the people and fell in love with all these girls who were forced to prostitute themselves in order to make a living. And she knew what education could do for them. So she went back and started paying for school fees for girls, individual girls. That's how she started. And that's what we were fundraising for, individual school fees for girls. But Katie decided that at some point, she needed a school, a safe place for these girls. And she needed not only that school to exist, but to be sustainable. And for that, she needed educators that were local and understood the local situation. Katie didn't partner up with a big UN organization to bring the lessons down. She partnered with the local government and the local community practices around there. Needless to say that now there are two More Than Me academies, and they are growing as we speak. They have, I think, more than 500 students, all girls, most of them having come from prostitution, who are now going to school and getting an education. The cool thing about Katie is that it doesn't just end there. Like when there was an Ebola crisis last year or something like that, Katie was in the education business. But as an expat there, working in development, she had made many contacts in the medical community. She had made many contacts in the expat community that was working on the ground. So when Ebola hit, she could have just stayed in her lane. But her students were dying. Her students' parents were dying. And she lives in the community. Like when Katie goes there, she doesn't get a mansion on the hill. She lives in the community. And instead of staying in her lane, taking the first flight to New Jersey, where she comes from, she stood there and kind of organized a mobile clinic that ended up saving hundreds of lives. She pivoted and took advantage of the resources and the local connections that she had made and her unique understanding of the community that she was living in to save an incredible amount of lives. Katie, who was in the schools for girls business, now became a health provider. To me, that's development work. That's investment. Investment on the social aspect, investment on the environmental aspect, and the financial aspect.
Isn't Fatima epic?
Yeah, her use of dramatic pause is second to none I have ever seen.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this clip for a while now, and in my assessment, there's two parts to the success of Katie, the woman that Fatima was talking about, her story. So first, Katie lived in community and was part of it. There was her people. There wasn't an us and them. There was no others there. And I think that's a first essential part that gives her the connection to make the work that she's doing meaningful.
Yeah, and this, like many other things in good international work, comes back to relationships, right? when she needed to expand or pivot, she turned to her relationships to make that happen. It wasn't some external body or some government or some donor, and that is interesting to me.
Yeah. So the second thing that really is bouncing around in my head, I think that Katie found some local people and invested in them. Now, this sounds a lot like what we do at Doctors for Doctors. So obviously, like I and you are biased, Andrew, but I see this as really a common thread of good development. Find locals and invest in them.
Yeah, and also tying in Fatima's first story, this is talking about investments based on what you can leave behind. And the direct investment in community is powerful by just giving people education in that.
100%.
Now, Fatima continues to wow us with her stories, and in this next clip, she speaks about her venture capital investing with tech companies in Rwanda.
So we went there thinking, you know what, we're just going to invest in tech companies, we're going to make a killing, we're going to revolutionize the whole of East Africa, and we're just going to give money to these incredibly well put together business plans of these young minds who are ready to just change the world in Africa from an African perspective. And we thought we were so much better because we thought we were going in there with the idea of growing businesses that are homegrown. We fell flat on our face because we had an idea of what a real business plan looks like. We had an idea of what businesses actually work from the point of view of what was working in North America and Canada and Europe, which is where most of us were coming from. And we had a partner coming from South Africa as well. We didn't ask questions. We didn't listen. We just showed up and we thought, we're African, we should know better. We didn't. And did we get our bums handed to us? Hard. I arrived in Rwanda, and at that time, I am already accustomed to the fact that if I give an appointment at 11, everybody will arrive around 1. I arrive in Kigali, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I have this 11 a.m. appointment. They're probably going to arrive at 1, but I'm going to be there at 11 and start working. They were there at 11:15, and obviously I was late. Right there, I was like, oh, Fatima, you should stop making assumptions. This is Rwanda. They're on time. They're 15 minutes early. You need to start being on time. And I was coming from the point of view of like, I know how this works, except it gets very social first, and then you get to business after. You don't actually start straight to like, okay, we're looking at a partnership between this and this and this and this. This is our list of company that we need, and da. I was meeting with an impact hub called Impact Hub in Kigali about the kind of really good tech people that they were seeing in their midst that would possibly fit our venture company. And they were so ready. They were so prepared. I was wasting their time. Here I am with my bag of money wasting their time and just readjusting and reevaluating myself and who I am and my biases and my entitlement and my privilege. Again, this trip really kicked my bum. Rwanda taught me that obviously I was an asshole. An entitled, privileged asshole with absolutely no idea what the hell I was doing. Because had I known, I would have been on time and ready to give them specs and numbers and expectations. But I was there for a social visit. They were there to work. I repaired it because I'm quick on my feet. And I haven't met a number that we have not been friends with yet. And Rwanda is beautiful. And it's amazing. It's one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. It's the darling of every single newsletter and newspaper about it.
I love this. I love this so much. The idea of someone from a similar culture feeling out of place because she makes false assumptions is so interesting.
So interesting.
And the fact that she calls herself out for it so hard, woof.
Yeah.
I really appreciate Fatima right now. I think I'm actually going to start a Fatima fan club after this. You in it with me, Mike?
Yeah. Sure. There's already one, I think, out there, isn't it? Hashtag Fatima not an asshole.
That's the one I've been using.
On Twitter.
Yeah. So if you want to tweet with us, hashtag Fatima not
follow
an asshole.
along.
But we can definitely maybe just praise her here first.
Sure.
Now, she also spoke a lot about her false assumptions of what good tech would be for the future of Africa and how her assumptions were wrong there too. Her ability to look at herself from a bird's eye view during this talk was so fun to watch, and I'm going to hand it over to Gabby here for what the university thought of it.
The event with Fatima Karenge was awesome. Talking to everyone that came out, the only feedback I had was positive. She was very engaging and humble in her achievements. By talking to us about her successes and failures and how she overcame them, she really encouraged us to take risks, to have patience, and to be persistent when things don't work out. From all of us at Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses, thank you, Fatima.
For all our listeners, if you want to hear everything that Fatima or any of our other speakers for Development Works say unedited, no edits at all.
Can't edit real life.
None. You can come in real life, and it's live recordings at the University of Toronto, downtown campus. Check out our website, doctorsfordoctors.ca, to find all the event details, or Facebook, or any of those other social media things. So our Canadian charity strives to do the best international development work possible. That's why we're here. That's why we do this. And as we continue to learn, we are sharing all our learnings with you.
And we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line on our website if you want to volunteer or get involved.
And now, updates for the month.
In Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses this month, we have lined up our new dental student, Victor, with our local partners in Nicaragua, the Foundation of Jean Brugger. After the interviews take place and all is cleared, Victor will be good for starting school again into his third year of dental school in February of 2018. And this will be Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses' fourth student sponsored.
Woo!
Yeah, this is a really big deal, actually.
Big deal.
Now, the end of the year in programs, for me, is always a really interesting time, Mike, because the charity gets a lot sorted out with what is essentially available to us via the funding that we have. So we get all of the stuff sorted out on the ground depending on the funding that we get.
And we're good to go. So on our Canadian side this month, we're finished counting all the money from our fundraiser last month, and thanks to everyone who donated, we made $3,500.
Yeah!
Which, I guess if you're a multi-million-dollar corporation, doesn't matter. But for a charity that has close to zero, that's a lot. So all of that will go directly to our student Kimberly, who's coming into her last year of medical school training in class. And we're also looking for an accountant. So if anybody out there in Radioland knows an accountant who may want to give back, please send them our way.
And that does it for this month's updates on Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Let's hand it back to Fatima for the last word.
Another culture shock. So in Canada, as a woman, you constantly have to prove that you're intelligent. Like, your intelligence is always questioned, especially as a woman who might like a really good pair of shoes. Like, people look at you and they assume, prove to me that you can speak my language, especially women in STEM. In Africa, my intelligence is never questioned. So although I go in there trying to being ready for the fight, there it's totally different. Gender and sexism is very different in Africa than it is here. I never have to prove my intelligence or my competency in Africa just because I'm a woman. So that, to me, is a culture shock.
And that's everything for this month's episode of Development Works. Thanks for listening.
This is Andrew and Mike signing off, and remember, if you don't make mistakes, you're not working on hard enough problems.